Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Times' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello. The death of a child is often described as the ultimate tragedy. Few of us could even begin to imagine the pain of such a devastating loss. And yet, every now and then, we hear an extraordinary story of a mother or a father rising like a phoenix from the ashes to carve out a new life of purpose and service to others that they may never have contemplated without the cruel loss of their child. Karen Johnson's fast-paced professional career as a federal judge came to an abrupt halt when she lost her 27-year-old son to a heroin overdose. Rather than grieve in a way that those around her expected, she quit her job, sold her house with all her belongings, and embarked on a 2.5-year journey around the world. Karen didn't think she could ever find her way out of despair, but along the way she found a new connection with her son and a spiritual path where the teachings and practices of modern shamanism became a catalyst for healing and transformation in her own life. A master practitioner in energy medicine and soul retrieval, and a senior teacher with the Four Winds Society, Karen Johnson joins me now to share her compelling story of loss, love, awakening, becoming unstuck, and creating a new life, which is chronicled in her book, Living, Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss. Karen Johnson, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sandy. I'm happy to be here.
So you went from being a federal administrative law judge who practiced criminal and energy law for more than 30 years. You're a former US Army officer, a Fulbright scholar in Afghanistan with master's degrees in public health and public international affairs. And then you took a big leap, and it was a big leap indeed, to go from a highly left-brained conservative life and outlook to training as a shaman. So tell us a bit about how losing your son catapulted you on that journey.
Yeah, so I knew my son was struggling. He wasn't a heroin addict, but he was definitely struggling as many young men are to find their way. And so I was going on a vacation to South Korea, and I thought, when I come back, we're going to have this tough talk. We're going to talk about his future. And he's one of these that was super smart and tried insurance and life insurance sales and was floundering. And at the age of 26 was going back to college and felt that he was too old and, his life was passing him by. So that's those talks we want to avoid all the time. And I thought, when I get back. So I was in South Korea and I wasn't feeling well at all that day, just not feeling well. And then I get a call about 6 p.m. And the person hangs up. And, most of the time when somebody hangs up, I don't pursue that call. But I had this feeling I just had to call back. So I called back, and it was a detective. And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in South Korea. Why?" He said, "Well, it's about your son." "What about him?" Right? He said, "Well, he's dead. He died from a heroin overdose." And my world just fractured at that moment. I can't even describe it. It was unexpected. So they say that the two worst kind of deaths are the death of a child and an unexpected death. And when you have the unexpected death of a child, you're in a world of hurt. And so night is day there, day is night. I couldn't get out on a flight until the next morning. So all that night calling people and, all of that and that you do and notifying people. And So I get to the airport and I'm waiting for my flight, and there he is. Ben appears right in front of me. Just he's 6'8", with his big old smile and looking at me, and then he kind of fades away and disappears. So at this moment, I don't have a spiritual practice. I have no understanding of what's going on whatsoever. And so I frantically called my ex-husband and I said, I think he's alive. I think he's trying to get out. I think he's stuck in that refrigerator. You got to call the ME right now and go get him out because he's alive. I just saw him. And so they all kind of catered to the hysterical mother, pretty much. And the ME said, yeah, I'm sorry. He's not alive. He's dead. And so that was the entranceway for me. Death can be a doorway. So death was the doorway into this concept of there being life after death. And before that, I had lost my parents and my grandparents. And if anybody would ask me, I would have said, alive is alive, dead is dead. That's all there is. That's where I was. And I never really found traditional religion to be particularly supportive or interesting. So, but then after that experience, and then coming home and feeling Ben around me that entire week, I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could sense him. So there's all those clairs, clairaudient, clairsentient, so I couldn't hear him, but I could sense him. And I could feel him frantic when I couldn't even go up the stairs to my house. So I would lay on the stairs screaming, and I would scream until I threw up, and then I would throw up until I threw up blood. So I was really in a very bad place. And then about 3 weeks of that, and I did what my left brain would never have considered doing. I went to Google and said mediums in Fairfax County. So Fairfax County is probably the most highly educated county in the United States. And so I never came across spiritual types of people, lots of academics and lots of highly educated people, but not a lot of spiritual people because I wasn't looking for them. And so a whole list pops up. And I didn't know who to pick, but one person's picture was larger than the other. And I said, okay, I'll take her. Right. And since that time, I know this is the way Spirit shows me the way. And I went back about a week later, and her picture was the same size as everybody else's. So I ended up going to her house, and I came in and I said, he just flew in behind your husband. He's standing right there. See how the candle's flickering? He's putting his hand there so that you can see him. And I said, I can see him. I know he's there, but I can't hear what he's saying. Can you tell me what he's saying? And so we had this wonderful experience of about an hour. And the things she said, passed on from him to me and to his sister, were just so Ben that it made me believe that was the case, that she was really getting his words. And he was nodding and gesticulating and showing me that was right. And so, that led to then when the session finished, she said, you might have some skills yourself, because most of my clients don't know that their loved one is in the room, let alone see them and sense them and all those things. And so that led me on this path of self-discovery, which was really, I just wanted to spend more time with Ben. I just wanted to contact him. So I did mediumship training and Kabbalah and crystals and soul paintings and basically anything that was out there of a course to take. And it finally, one of my instructors said, you want to contact this evolutionary astrologer. He's been doing about 30, 40 years. Why don't you see what he has to say? So I signed up, evolutionary astrologer. Okay, what does that exactly mean? Now I know what it means, but I didn't understand then how really perceptive he would be. And so it was an hour and a half. And about half an hour in, I thought, oh boy, he's got to stop talking. I don't even know, this is too much. And he said, oh, your soul has chosen a different path, away from Uranus, from shame, blame, guilt, to Neptune, the mystical path. And I'm thinking, what, pray tell, is a mystical path? I don't even understand what that means. And he said, well, a woman that had a reading like yours became a shaman. And I remember saying, a shaman? You mean they're shamans? are there still shamans? I thought they all died out. And so I did what I get off when my left brain told me to Google it, and I popped the Four Winds Society and Alberto Villoldo, and 3 weeks later I'm on a plane for a class in Joshua Tree, California, thinking to myself, I'll be too old. I won't be, like those people who are going to be kind of out there. And if I don't like this, I'll just go down to Palm Springs and get a nice facial and a massage and call it a week, right? And of course, it was perfect. It was wonderful. And then, and that was the beginning of this spiritual journey with the Four Winds, and then my journey around the world.
And what did you learn about grieving in that process?
I think the most important thing I learned was that our society is so soundbite, so quick. We're done with that. Are you still talking about that? But that was like a month ago, right? The most important thing I learned is grief is a journey. Mm-hmm. And everybody has their own journey, and they have a right to their own journey through grief. And nobody has the right to tell you it's time to move on. It's time to not talk. Let's not talk about that. That was a good one, famous one. People would say, let's not talk about that. Oh, you mean the elephant in the room? Yes, let's not talk about the elephant in the room, right? And then sometimes I would think, oh, you mean my son, Ben? That's what you don't want to talk about. So you can get either very isolated or very angry or both. Because people we make people uncomfortable. We grieving people make others uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, we're all going to experience it, at some point. And I guess there's a fear there,
Yeah.
So let's shy away from it. But you say that identifying grief and loss, there's a lot more to that than most people think. Tell me about that.
Well, so grief and loss are really complicated, right? So they affect us at many different levels. And the journey that we take is one where we really want to get out of our reptilian brain, our everyday brains, the physical realm, because it's very heavy to shift things at the physical realm. And people will tell you, I've read all the books on grief. They told me I need to have a date and I need to go out to dinner and I need to do all these things, but I can't get there. So why? This question I asked myself, and that's the question I was asking Spirit, is how do we get there? How do we do these things we're supposed to tell us we're supposed to do? And so the way we get there is we get there through ceremony. Ceremony takes us out of our reptilian brain, our everyday brain, to our neocortex. And neocortex is the brain of ceremony. And at that level, things can shift like a feather blowing in the breeze instead of at the physical level. So that's why we know that ceremony is important, because when we walk into a temple or a church and they have candles, it's almost like we're lemmings. We go right over to the candle and light it and we put it down. And we know that candles and smoke take our prayers to heaven, to spirit, to whatever the universal consciousness, whatever your persuasion is, it takes them there. And so if you can sit in ceremony I always tell people to have a little pie pan and a candle, pie pan to catch the ashes, and a paper and pen. And with radical honesty, write down answers to questions like, who are you judging? Who's judging you? Oh, sometimes I found I was judging myself. Oh, and I was judging Ben. I was really uncovered the fact that I was really very angry at him. That was not supposed to happen. And that I was very unhappy that he ruined my life. So it's all about me, of course. But it's a way of, with radical honesty, when you know you're writing something down and you're going to burn it in the fire, it's gone. It's gone to spirit, God, the universe, collective consciousness, somewhere where nobody can find it. There's not going to be repercussions of somebody, your mother, your sister, your brother, finding your journal and reading it and getting angry and all those sorts of things. So this is radical honesty. Suffering. Oh gosh, non-suffering, that beautiful practice of non-suffering. What are the stories that you're telling yourself? I should have done this. I should have made them go to the doctor. I should have talked to my son sooner. I shouldn't have put him in that school. I should have put him in another. I should have. So all these would, shoulds, could that are in our mind, stirring around, putting them down on a piece of paper, and then burning it with the intention of releasing it and opening your heart to other ways of thinking and believing and perception. So, changing our perception is, even the slightest bit changes everything. And so that's what we're doing. I've got 16 exercises in the book that take people from being stuck all the way to creating a new life out of the ashes of the old.
You talk about the wondrous wisdom of grief. Tell me about that wisdom. What is the wisdom?
Okay, so one way you can kind of tap into that there might be wisdom is you think about things like marriage and parenthood. We all know that they're transformative, and we have big celebrations, right? This is a big thing and a big deal. And grief, ooh boy, what about that one? That is also filled with transformative wisdom and energy. And if we can tap into that energy and that wisdom of being that grieving person whose heart is now broken open in a way that it might never have been. I mean, I know mine was. My heart was broken open to spiritual matters, to bend, to the world, to service, to meaning and purpose in a way that I might have entirely gone my whole life without touching into. And so those are the transformative qualities of grief if we allow ourselves to transform and to get out of being stuck. And sometimes that's hard because our society gets focused, Western society especially, gets focused on the concept that we have to suffer. We should show how much we loved our loved one by staying in, by wearing black, by not going out, by keeping their room as a shrine, by all these things that maybe are a little bit antithetical to really the process. So what if we don't have to suffer? What if our loved ones already know that we love them because they're right there? The veil is really thin, and I think in these days with everything that's going on, the veil is even thinner, but they're right there. So they see you grieving, they know you love them. And so this demonstration, who is it really for? Is it
exactly?
Is it for everybody around us, right? So we're trying to prove something, but there's no win. So if you grieve too much and too long, there's something in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in the United States that says that this can be medicated, right? This is a mental disease or disorder, right? And if you grieve too much, they want to medicate you. And if you don't grieve enough, boy, she sure didn't care. So you can't win. You might as well grieve your own way. You might as well find your own path through grief and allow yourself to do it in your own time. Because you're not going to win. You're not going to please anybody but yourself.
Someone once said to me that when you lose someone very close to you, a sibling, a child, a parent, a part of you has gone. The part of you that you were, with that person, the part of you that you expressed, the part of you that, carried the expectations of that person, and the history that you've had with that person. And that goes. And some people feel the loss of that very, very deeply, and others actually feel a freedom from it, a freedom to go on to the next level and be, something different. Yeah. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes, relationships, wow. What defines us confines us. So a relationship, even if it's a wonderful, beautiful relationship, can be confining in certain ways. And sometimes when that person's gone and we feel it's grief relief, we feel that little bit of relief and we beat ourselves up for it, right? But that's it, because there is a constraint, spiritual, emotional, physical, that's now been shifted. So sometimes people go between the two extremes, grief relief, until it kind of balances. It takes a little bit of time. And that's why telling somebody it's time to move on, it's time to go, let's not talk about that. They have to go through that process. And even I was talking to a dear friend that lost her husband, and it's been about 3 years. And we were talking about, what does she do? What does she do now? And I said, you need to dream your future, dream your world into being. Mm. And she said, I can't imagine a future without him. And I said, yeah. I said, but after 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, you come to this point where there's sometimes, like I had it with my son, where you think, he's going to come back. This is all a big mistake. I'm sure it must be the FBI or the CIA. He's off as an operative somewhere. And all of a sudden he's going to walk in the door and say, I'm home, right? It's same thing with her husband, that this was a mistake, and she keeps waiting to hear. And it takes that process of realizing they're not coming back. And it takes us a while to get there, right? And that's an important process. It's to allow yourself to get to that space, so that you can then begin to dream a life for yourself, create a new life out of the ashes of the old.
You say also in the book that the act of non-doing can dramatically change one's life. What do you mean by that?
So non-doing is a practice. So that most of us spend our lives filling in every waking moment with something. I have this to do and that to do, and this my to-do list today. And I even had one friend, I talk about this in a book, but I just love this. She had the entire weekend scheduled. So Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, Sunday morning, Saturday. So everything was scheduled, right? And so we keep ourselves busy, 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 busy. And why? We want to avoid uncomfortable emotions. If we never take time to sit with ourselves and give our consciousness a little bit of rest and our egos a little bit of rest, and then we get to really know ourselves, and we really get to begin to deal with those uncomfortable emotions that underlie a lot of that busy, busy, busy behavior, that underlie a lot of the drama we engage in. And I love Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And he talks about how addictive adrenaline is and cortisol. So we become addicted to drama. We become addicted to this avoidance. We become addicted to busy. And so sitting's not easy for everybody. It wasn't easy for me. I really struggled with sitting. And today even, I like the doorway to begin with chanting. And with chanting, I can quiet that busy mind and get to that still place. But it's very hard for me to just plop down and sit and say, okay, meditate now. My mind is like, say what? No. So it's that process of allowing ourselves gently, gently, gently to maybe not be so overscheduled. Maybe not be so busy, and tune into what is driving that. What are we trying to avoid?
You had contact with your son soon after he passed, and it was a few years before you found the Four Winds Society. What do you think gave you the most resources, in a way, and strength to move through this? Was it knowing that your son, that you could still communicate, knowing that he still existed somewhere, knowing that there was life after death, which is probably something you hadn't contemplated before, or what you discovered through all of the, indigenous shamanic wisdom, that you experienced with the Four Winds Society?
It was sort of all going on at the same time. So I was going around the medicine wheel several times as I was traveling the world. And I really thought, what I'm going to write here is a blog. I'm going to write a travel blog, right? In the beginning. That's about how deep I could go at that moment. And as I traveled and as I went deeper through the practices of the medicine wheel, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm being downloaded a book here. This is important. This is something that I want to share with people. This is my kind of mission now. I kind of found my place, my stability, my reason for being. You know, we all need meaning and purpose. And when you lose somebody close to you, your sense of meaning and purpose and equilibrium is just gone. It's just, it takes a while to get sort of back on track and to find yourself. That's why we talk about non-doing. We've got to find ourselves. So one of the questions I asked myself before I went on my worldwide journey was, if I could do anything I wanted, not having to worry about money or family or job or anything, what would I do? And I harkened back to my youth when I wanted to be an archaeologist, an anthropologist, and my parents said, "Oh, no, that's too dangerous for women, and that's, you can't make money at that, so let's do something else." And then I went to law school, and the rest is history. In 30 years, I became unconscious. I did everything I was supposed to do, made money, had children, got married, all of that, and was much profoundly lost. And invisible. I became like this invisible person where, it just, my inner life was not marrying up with anything at that point. I didn't have an inner life. So that sort of prompted me to go on this journey and make a book out of this journey that's developed on its own. And sometimes I still read passages in the book and I think, oh, wow, thank you, because I don't know where that came from. That was a download. That was a gift.
Karen, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and my guest today is former US Army Major and Federal Administrative Law Judge Karen V. Johnson, whose book, Living, Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss, chronicles the radical transformation of her beliefs, skills, and life purpose following the loss of her 27-year-old son to a heroin overdose. We'll be back with more from Karen after the break.
Om Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back. Karen, your book, Living Grieving, is structured around practices that are part of the Four Winds medicine wheel, as developed by Alberto. Tell me about the medicine wheel and the 4 insights and the practices that you've associated with them to help the bereaved begin the process of transformation.
Sure. So the first direction in the medicine wheel, this is the Andean medicine wheel. So it's based on the Southern Cross. It's a little different star constellation than we have in North America. In North America, people are familiar with medicine wheels beginning in the East. So we begin in the South. And the archetypal power animal that's associated with it is serpent. And the serpent, we know, represents the caduceus. It represents the feminine, and it represents shedding your past, just like the serpent sheds its skin, exposing all that new undergrowth so you can continue to grow. And so there are 4 practices associated with the South. And so we have non-judgment, non-suffering, non-engagement, and the beauty way. And the beauty way is so important because a lot of us that are lost in grief and loss, and I'm including people that are caregivers and people who have children that are lost in addiction, and they're on watch every day, not sure whether their child's going to make it through another overdose. And so we lose that practice of beauty. We lose that ability to find something every day that is beautiful to us, because it's so important, because as we're in grief and loss, we're digging those neural networks deeper and deeper and deeper in habits ingrained, and we become so ingrained in despair and suffering, it's hard to get out. So it's that practice of doing one little thing. If it's a flower, if it's a meal, if it's a piece of chocolate, if it's a sunset, doing one thing every day begins to reinforce that practice of beauty so that you can begin to come out, so that you can begin to put away some of the suffering and despair. And then we move on to the west direction of the medicine wheel, and that's represented by Jaguar. And Jaguar is that fearless one that calls whatever is dead and dying in the jungle. And so we call on this powerful archetype, this luminous warrior, to help us shed in that way, to release whatever is dead and dying within us. Old ways of thinking, believing, knowing, old family ways and traditions and societal mores and all the things that bind us up. We begin to release those a little bit so that we can come out of that. And this is this process of finding yourself. And so there's non-doing, non-engagement, certainty, fearlessness. Fearlessness is a big part. So it's like fearlessness is, for us that are grieving, it's sort of like the old story about the fireman who goes up to a burning building, high ladder up to a window, and tells the person, come on, come down the ladder. And the person says, I can't, I'm scared, I'm afraid. And the fireman says, do it scared. Wow, that's just such a priceless metaphor to me. Sometimes we just have to do things scared. If you're going to wait to not be scared and wait not to be in fear, then you can be profoundly stuck.
Yeah, you say with regard to the chapter 3, which is the West direction, you're talking about not colluding with the consensual.
Yeah.
So it's I guess it's the restrictions, the rules, all of the things that we have been conditioned to follow. You're saying, shed them.
Yeah, take a look at them. It's sometimes just taking a look and writing them down with the intention of lightening that load, giving it to spirit. There's things that we unconsciously, we gravitate toward communities we think are safe and people we think are safe and situations and jobs. And like my parents telling me it's not safe for a woman to be an archaeologist. It's, you got to do this, you got to do that. Or someone's pushing someone to be a doctor or a lawyer, or all those things that we inherit. Or maybe it's like, oh, you can't do that. You don't know how. You're not smart enough. You're not this enough. You're not that enough. Letting go and releasing these things are so powerful, and opening your heart, releasing it to spirit and asking for change. And so as we ask for change, perceptions can shift, and so can we. There's that old story, or that old saying, a leopard can't change its spots. But I'm here to tell you, you can change your spots. I changed mine. I came from this completely left brain person to a spiritual one.
A lot of people find it really, really difficult to let go of beliefs, particularly ones that have, been instilled in them by parents. They feel disloyal, or they feel if they let go of a particular belief, they're actually negating everything that went before.
Yes.
How do you help them get over those hurdles?
That's the beauty of giving it to spirit and asking for transformation and opening your heart to new ways, because that way you're not in your head about it and all that disloyal, it's not right, it's this, it's that, what will happen, Chicken Little, the sky's going to drop, they're going to find out, they're going to get me. If when you release it to spirit and then ask for change and transformation to come in, spirit's going to bring it in a way that is acceptable to you. It doesn't have to be all at once. You can ask spirit to bring it in with ease and grace and to open your heart to new ways. So it's opening. It's that moment of saying, okay, I'm going to open it to spirit to bring me a different perspective, to help me to change, to help me see things in a different way. And a lot of people who have lost someone to grief and lost someone they love, or had a terrible situation. So it can be loss of a job, loss of a partner, loss of a marriage. It doesn't have to be just death. These are big losses. And sometimes those losses are a doorway.
Mm.
And we kind of have this little inkling that maybe I could have looked at things or done things a little differently if I hadn't been so bound up on what other people told me I should be doing, or I ought to be doing, or I couldn't do, or whatever. So that's why grief, if we can tap into that wisdom of grief, it's that moment where we say, oh, I think I could have done things differently, or I wish I could have done things differently. I wish things could be different. We have that moment of opportunity to tap into that transformational wisdom of grief. And that's the beauty of it. And that's the beauty of working through these things. So at a time when spirit is so around you. So in the Lakota tradition, people that are grieving are considered to be close to spirit, and they're honored. And so I think that's exactly it. We are close to spirit. And we have this opportunity for transformation that we can tap into if only we knew about it. And our society doesn't really help us with that too much.
No, it doesn't. No, it just wants to bury it all.
Yeah,
For sure. We really do need help coping with,
Yes.
life's rites of passage and transitions.
For sure.
And very little help around. If people are using your book, these processes as a guide through their grief, I mean, is there any limit on time? How quickly or slowly one should or might move through it?
So everybody is so different. So I have a lot of classes, and it's a 5-week class. And so we have an introduction. This is what we're going to do. And then each week we take southwest, northeast direction of the medicine wheel. And so they work through 4 exercises a week. And some people just tear it up. They're ready to go on to the next one. And other people, it takes them a week, right? And sometimes the beauty of working in community is somebody tells you, I burned this and I burned that and I released this and released that. And someone goes, oh, I'm going to go back. I'm going to burn that one too. I have that too, right? And so working together in community is so profoundly healing because everybody is in the same place. So we're a community of grievers instead of a community of doubters or scoffers that surround us. And so it's beautiful in that way.
Mm. So tell us what happens, what's the North all about, the North practices?
So the North is hummingbird medicine. I love hummingbirds. So you think about the rest of the wheel as you've got a serpent and a jaguar, and then at the end you've got an eagle. They're all predators. And so look at this little hummingbird, right? What does hummingbird have to teach us? Hummingbird teaches us courage. Courage to follow our soul's longing, even if it's not quite perfect timing. The hummingbird doesn't have very big wings, doesn't have any food along the way, and yet it travels from Canada to Brazil and back every year. And so that's the mythical, archetypal energy of following your soul's guidance, right? And so if you've released some of the mores and restrictions of your culture and family, then you're ready to take this epic journey with Hummingbird and begin to really follow your own guidance, your own path, and figure out what that really is. What is it for you? What does your soul long for? If you say to yourself, what would I do if I could do anything? What comes to mind? And so not everybody's ready to throw everything up in the air and go on a 2.5-year journey around the world with 2 suitcases like I did, but you don't have to. Just asking the questions opens up something in you. It changes your perception and your perspective and allows you to co-create with the universe to create something different, something beautiful.
You have these keywords, these principles, with each direction. And with that particular one, what is awakening invisibility?
Oh, invisibility. That's so important. Yeah, because that's where we shed our roles. So many of us carry mother, daughter, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, worker, blah, blah, blah. If you put them all down, you might come up with 25 or 50 or 100. And they're all heavy and weighing on us because some of them have beautiful aspects and some of them have kind of heavy aspects. Like people say, I don't want to give up being a mom. Well, maybe you want to give up being a helicopter mom. Yeah. Maybe you want to give up being, right? So it's the heaviness. If you can reduce the heaviness of this load of roles, if you think of your life as like a plane, so you can be a 747, everything is heavy and the drinks don't spill and the food doesn't spill, but you can't turn very fast, right? We want to become helicopters. We want to be able to turn on a dime. We want to be able to shift. We want to unload some of that heaviness so that we can be flexible and adjust and change and shift.
And what about the East?
So the East direction, okay, that's the realm of eagle, the archetype of eagle. So eagle flies high, wingtip to wingtip with great spirit. Eagle is the only bird that flies high over all the storms looking for a clearing and never gets caught up in a storm. It's always up there looking for a clearing. So we want to be like that. We want to fly with great spirit. We want to fly wingtip to wingtip. We want to find our way over those storms of life, but yet always see the big picture and the smallest mouse in the forest. So that's what eagle teaches us, that perspective, that big perspective. Instead of being stuck in our small little lives, we have eagle eyes, we have eagle perspective. And so that's where we're going in the East, in that direction. This is where we can create a new life, be reborn out of the ashes of the old. And one of the practices there is indigenous alchemy. Wow, what's that? So indigenous is native or inherent, and alchemy is desire for change. So what if we as humans are hardwired for change? What if that's what we seek? That's what we're supposed to seek, that we're hardwired for shifting and changing and being that helicopter. And as we remain stuck in our grief and loss, we carry that heavy, heavy energy. And when that energy doesn't shift, it manifests often in illness. So in my clients, if someone's got cancer, autoimmune, many diseases, if I go back far enough, they've got some kind of unresolved grief or loss. And being able to work with that allows them to shift their life. We don't cure, we heal. I can't say that we cure cancer or we cure autoimmune, although that happens spontaneously and unexpectedly. But healing those wounds and really grieving losses, people lose a parent very young and people want to protect them, so they don't tell them all the circumstances. They want to keep them in the dark, and that keeping people in the dark can have profound effects. Losing a child, losing a loved one, being told it's time to move on and not being allowed to fully grieve. And we carry that energy, that heavy, dark energy. And so shamans are always working with the energetic. So we see life as we've got the physical body and the emotional body surrounded by the soul and the etheric. And so we're always working with the etheric, releasing energy, releasing heavy energies, and helping people to bring that down, to find their soul path.
It's an interesting thing about change. I mean, you said that, we're hardwired for it, and of course we must be because we're changing constantly. However, it seems to be the biggest challenge that many people have is, everybody fears change. Everybody seems to think that change is going to be bad.
You're right.
Few people embrace it as, oh, wow, a door, as you say, an opportunity. It's got to be bad. Can't be good.
Can't be good. But that's why you have to do the work of the South and the West and the North before you get to the East. Because that's it. Until you do that work of shedding old ways of thinking, believing, doing, knowing, you really can't see the opportunities and synchronicities that are before us always. We just don't see them because we've got our blinders on. I don't see it. I'm going to stay right here. Stuck is safe. Familiarity is not our friend. It keeps us small. It keeps us safe. It puts us in our fear box, right? And so when you try something different, the fear box goes, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Not safe, not safe. You're just going to ruin your life. You're going to do it. And if you ever notice, as soon as you take the first step, it kind of falls away. But it's taking those steps. But we can't just get to the end before going through the beginning. We have to go through these processes. So before people get to the East, they've got 12 practices to work through that will help them become lighter and lighter. So when they get there, they're ready. They're ready for shifts. They're ready then to say, okay, what can I do? How can I create a new life that honors my loved one, right? So some people say, I don't want to create a new life and have my loved one think I don't care. And here I am out partying and this and that, like there's nothing happened. That's not the point. The point is how can you create a new life that honors your loved one? And everybody's answer will be different. Some people will, I had someone who donated a lot of money to Narcan to make sure all the firefighters and police had Narcan, and it created a little foundation. So, it can be a foundation for anything. People get very involved in Compassionate Friends. Compassionate Friends is a fantastic group for people that have lost children. There's so many beautiful organizations. So people get involved, begin to become involved, begin to use their grief to help others.
It seems so practical and so essential. It's really hard to believe that it is not available to everyone. There should be, everybody should be able to have access to something like this.
Yeah. It's hard. It's just not part of our cultural roots. So we don't know about it. We don't think about it that way. And we've been schooled to think that grief has to look a certain way, and it's always heavy and it's always dark. And maybe what if we shifted that even and celebrated grief?
Yeah. There is no rule book for grief.
No.
I lost my sister a year ago after a horrible illness, and I didn't know what I was supposed to feel for such a long time. And then you start second guessing yourself. Well,
Right.
I should feel something. I should feel this, or I should feel that, or what's wrong with me, or it's it would be very. I wish I'd had your book then, because it certainly would have helped me, move through it with less, regret and
And
guilt.
sometimes just allowing yourself to be numb. Right. And a year is really not that long.
No,
you're still in that process. And that's okay. Right. And you still have a ways to go. And so a lot of times people are like, oh, a year, I should be over this by now. Right.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And even all the work I've done and writing the book and being a shaman and everything, I still got knocked over by grief at the 5-year mark.
I'm
It was like I was just completely knocked out. So we get waves of grief. The difference is instead of being completely in despair and hopelessness, I realize I'm going to always miss my son. I'm going to miss him being there. I'm going to miss talking to him. I'm going to miss all that. And it hurts. It's painful. None of these practices will get rid of pain. But what they get rid of is that ruminating, that mind that is in shame, blame, guilt, all those things. So we can release all of that. And what we are left with is the pain. And so, yeah, sometimes we're going to get knocked over with pain, but not with suffering, if that makes sense.
Do you still communicate with your son?
Yes.
You do.
We work together. Yeah. As only a 27-year-old can do, he came to me and he just said one time, he said, "Mom, quit ringing my doorbell here." He said, "I'm doing things over here." I'm in the Jesus pod. We weren't particularly religious. He's like, he's so cool. And it's not anything like you've heard before. And so, Mom, I'm really busy here. But for a mother, that's what I want to pass on to all the other grieving parents. Your children are not in eternal slumber. They're not miserable. They're happy. They want to do things. And the more you can be happy, you kind of release the hold on their kite string. Yeah. Right? So they can go off and do all the wonderful things that are on the other side to be done.
So when you look back, before your son died, the life you were living, the work you were doing back then, I mean, what do you think now when you look back at that?
Oh, gosh. I think about that consumerism. I was really into what everybody else had and what everybody else was buying and shopping and, getting my, that emotional high from shopping, endless shopping. And then I got more stuff. And then once I got the stuff, I was really happy for a little bit. And then I needed more stuff. And that stuff went to a closet somewhere, a basement somewhere. And, as George Carlin says, we don't own our stuff owns us. Mm. And so when I think about, oh gosh, that consumerism and all those wasted years of trying to find something to soothe my unhappiness, and not knowing, had a clue of how to do it. No clue to where to begin. And so I look at all that and I think, oh, how many years I wasted. And I don't remember my 40s. I was so busy. I lost a decade. I'm sure I went on a few vacations, although I prided myself on not taking vacations because I was a hard worker. And I'm sure, the sandwich generation with my parents and raising children, and I lost myself and I lost those years. And I think, what a waste. I wasn't present. I don't even remember. I was so unpresent. I don't remember. And that's really sad. And I think many of us get to that. Well, we get so wrapped up in work and striving and just the busyness of life and the demands and the pressure and all of that we lose time, we lose ourselves, and so that's what I think is such a waste, that I couldn't have known how to be conscious, how to be present, what that even meant.
Mm. It seems so wrong to call loss, death, especially of a young person, a gift. Mm. But your son gave you so many gifts.
Yes.
Gave you back yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had this, someone said that his soul and my soul had some kind of cosmic tea party before we came in, and then that's what we were going to do. He was going to go so that I could become spiritually aware. And I thought about that, and then I said, but I have another child. And I had just read Elizabeth Lesser's book, Broken Open. I didn't know Elizabeth Lesser, but she had somehow I got her email, and I just emailed it just to get it off my chest. And I said, now I'm totally devastated. If I made this kind of karmic agreement with my son, what did I make with my daughter? And bless her heart, she wrote back and said, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. And not to worry. And so she was so comforting and so soothing. And she's been so supportive with this book. We kept in contact after. So, what I love is there are people out there that you can reach out and be surprised at who's going to answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm afraid we're out of time now, Karen. This has been a fascinating conversation, and the book, I think, is invaluable, and not just for people who've lost someone through death, but loss of any kind, as you pointed out, whatever it may be, hopes, dreams, whatever, health. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Living Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss by Karen B. Johnson is published by Hay House. You can find out more about Karen Johnson's events, retreats, workshops, and consulting services, and of course her book at karenjohnson.net. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me. Thank you, Karen.